Hey YouTube, Turbine Dude here. Today I want to talk about a flight that I'm planning tomorrow. We're going to go from Conroe, Texas, just north of Houston, out over the Gulf of Mexico, over what's called the Q routes, and we're going to wind up in Naples, Florida. In this video I'm going to talk about some considerations for flying over the Q routes and what the Q routes actually are. Again, behind me, my 1981 Mitsubishi Mu2 Marquee. I'm going to make several video segments that are going to be put together in this video. I'll talk about what the Q routes are, the alert areas over the Gulf, and the implications of that, and how that ties in if there's thunderstorms over the Gulf, some of the equipment that's required, and just some flight planning considerations and emergency equipment you should have, things like that. Enjoy the video, and like, share, subscribe if you like what you saw today. Alright guys, one of the first things I have to do to plan for my trip tomorrow out over the Gulf of Mexico to Naples, Florida is update the database and the GPS that's in the airplane. That helps me navigate. And we update the database to make sure that all the approach procedures and airways are current information, because sometimes there's minor changes to that kind of thing. So we have to update that database. They're on I believe a 28-day refresh cycle. And so it's really easy on this. I have a Garmin GTN 725 in this aircraft. So all you have to do is push on the little SD card and it pops out slightly. And then I have a laptop here with an SD card reader. So you plug that into the SD card reader. And then Garmin has a neat app called Garmin Aviation Database Manager. I'm going to unmount the camera real quick. I'll cut the video right here. I have a for-flight screen capture on the iPad, so as I load things, you can sort of see the points that I'm putting in, which will demonstrate a very typical route that you would have going from Texas or Louisiana down to Florida. So here I'm going to type in KCXO, which is a Conroe. That's one of the North Houston suburbs. So it's going to digest that for just a minute. And then I'm going to pick a departure procedure out of Conroe. Here's the list. You can see the different names that are available. I'm probably going to pick just the Lake Charles 5 because that goes over to Lake Charles, Louisiana. No transition. And then I'm going to type in LEV, which is the identifier for Leeville. Then I'll type in the airway Q102. The endpoint of that, that's very typical that we use, is Bags. That's a very common one anyway. That's off the west coast of Florida. And then I'm going to type in KAPF, which is the identifier for Naples, Florida. Here I'll zoom out a little bit. You can sort of see the fixes along with some ADS-B traffic there. Looking at Lake Charles, Louisiana. As we work our way eastbound, we come up on Leeville, which is LEV. That's straight south of New Orleans. And you can see a little tag there in black, Q102. So there's the Q route. Blevins continues to be Q102 all the way through. You'll notice north of there's some squares or sort of square-like shapes that are warning areas. They say warning and then W with a number after that. You can touch each one and it'll give you information about the altitude that covers. And then one there to the south as well has a blue border with sort of a comb looking there. It's warning area 168. You can tell that on either side of Q102 there's these warning areas. And what those are is military airspace, essentially, is the simple answer. There's a military base in Pensacola. There's W470 Echo. And it'll give you the altitudes and the times that it's active. And basically the military uses these for training missions. If you touch out here just in space, it'll give you all the info for the points that are around this. So there's the Miami, let's see, UIR. That's I forget what the U stands for. Basically a flight information region, and it shows you the controlling agency here. It's Miami Center and the various frequencies. If you were out here and you needed to find a frequency, if you lost comms or something, you need to find a frequency, you'd look for a remote of a city that's closest to where you are. Maybe Sarasota would probably be appropriate in there, and you could just try the frequency so you found the one that worked. From sea level up to 17,999, it's the FIR, so that's the low altitude portion of that airspace with some calm frequencies. Again, warning areas on both sides. The trouble that creates is if there's weather between those warning areas, they won't let you go over the Q routes, and so they'll say the Gulf is closed. There's the Naples airport where we're headed. Zooming back out, this actually happened to me returning from Naples on a trip a few months ago. I'd filed over the Q routes to go back to Texas, and the warning areas were hot, meaning they're in use by the Navy or Air Force, Armed Forces, and then there were storms between those warning areas that covered up the Q routes, so they wouldn't clear me that way. I hadn't put enough fuel on to actually go overland, because that's a further route, and so we actually had to stop in north central Florida and do a fuel stop that was sort of unplanned. So it worked out okay, but a little frustrating because I'd fueled the airplane. We'd started the engines before I got the clearance. You can see here on the Q route, if you measure, about 115 miles offshore. That's about as far offshore as you get. So that does lead to the equipment requirements that I'll show in another portion of this video. You have to have a raft and life jackets for everybody. Since you are beyond power off gliding distance from shore, the FARs actually do require you to carry certain emergency equipment on board the aircraft. Under there in bright yellow, that's my raft. You are required to have a raft. And then also have to have life jackets for everybody. I bought these airline style ones. They're Switlick brand. And it's just like on the airline, when they brief you, you tear the red strip off, which opens the bag. You put the vest over your head. There is a, some webbing with a buckle. You wrap that around you, buckle the buckle. You do want to wait until you're out of the aircraft to inflate this, because if the aircraft starts to take on water, the flotation might be a bad thing. It might prevent you from exiting the aircraft if you are starting to take on water. So that is definitely something you want to brief the passengers on. You put the vest on in the airplane. You do not inflate it until you're outside the airplane. And then once you are outside the airplane and you're clear of the wing and everything, there is a little lanyard that you pull, and that automatically inflates the vest. So you need a life jacket for everybody. Again, I prefer these inflatable ones that are sort of the airline style ones. Other things you're required to have a pyrotechnic signaling device, and to most people that means a flare gun. So there's some options there. I have the type that has the sort of shotgun shell style cartridges. This all comes as a kit. I just bought it on Amazon. I think it was about $60 or so. Also in here, it kind of comes in a kit in this zippered bag, and it comes with a signal mirror. That's right there with that little lanyard, that orange lanyard around it. And I believe that's a whistle with the yellow lanyard. Let's see, a radio. So I just have my aircraft VHF handheld transceiver here. I've got a Yaesu one. I've been really happy with it. This would let you talk to any emergency aircraft. So if you see aircraft flying overhead, 121.5 on the frequency would allow you to talk to any aircraft in the area. And then I also have one of these cool little spot locators. This allows you to send text messages to people in your contacts list, and then it also has this SOS button. To operate that guy, you have to lift the little cover up because they don't want you bumping it, because it could trigger a emergency response. So they want to make sure that you mean it, and you hold down that red SOS button and it'll send out an SOS. So this is satellite based. The main thing with this is you need to make sure that you charge it before you leave so it has enough power when you really need it. But this will send out your location. I believe when you push the SOS, it sends also an email to everybody that you've set up in your contacts list. I put everything in this dry bag and cinch the top down. Should keep everything dry, and the idea is on this aircraft that you have all the emergency gear that you need, and you can just tell people, hey, grab the orange bag on your way out. My aircraft, some advantages that it has is a high wing design. So ideally when the belly touches, the propellers really aren't digging into the water yet. So this should be a pretty ditchable airplane, I guess you could say. Two ways out, you have the main cabin door in the back. The other thing, you have the ledge of that back door might be underwater if you actually had to ditch the thing. It also has this underwing emergency exit. So you just push in the little spring-loaded tab, and then this handle right here, you would pull that out. that would cause the door to fall in. You can see there actually is a card table that's here in the way on this aircraft. If you pull up really hard with, just put your hand on either side and pull up sharply, there's some pins that disengage. That card table will actually come out of the way. So before you try to open the door, you want to remove the card table by pulling up. And then, like I said, you put your hand through the cover, pull the handle, the door will tilt in, and then as it leans in, you can lift it up and it will lift free of the hardware that secures it into the opening. Or you can turn it sideways and throw it out, or you can just set it here in the cabin just to get it out of the way. And then hopefully by then everybody has their life vests on. And the raft, it has what's called a painter line, which is just a rope. You tie the painter line to something in the aircraft, and then I believe it's about 20 feet of rope. Once it gets to the end of that, you give it a sharp tug, and then the raft should inflate, ideally once everybody's clear of the airplane. Anyway, that's mainly the emergency equipment you're supposed to have.